I'm 42, and for my entire life, I've been the fixer in my family. My younger sister, Chloe, 38, is the one who always seems to be in the middle of a storm. It's not that she's a bad person, but she's always been chaotic. So, when she called me 3 weeks ago, hysterical, saying an electrical fire had destroyed their apartment and they had nowhere to go, I did what I always do. I told her, of course, that she, her husband, and my 16-year-old niece, Maya, could stay with me. I have a guest room and a finished basement. I figured it would be a couple of weeks max, until the insurance sorted them out. Honestly, it's been awful. They aren't just messy, they are disrespectful. They eat my food, use my things without asking, and I'm constantly cleaning up after 3 adults who seem to think I'm their maid. But I kept biting my tongue, telling myself that they're traumatized and just lost everything. I kept reminding myself to be compassionate. Yesterday, Maya was bringing in another carload of things they'd salvaged from the apartment, mostly smoke-damaged clothes and whatever was in storage. I was helping her carry a few boxes down to the basement when one of them tipped, spilling open. Most of it was just normal teenage stuff, but a small, familiar wooden box skidded across the floor. My heart just stopped. It was an old music box my grandfather carved for me. I hadn't seen it in at least 20 years. I thought it had been lost during a move when I was in college. I picked it up, my hands shaking. Maya looked at me, wide-eyed, and immediately tried to grab it, telling me it was hers. I opened it. Inside, nestled on the faded velvet, was my grandmother's locket, the one she gave me on her deathbed. Next to it were 2 other pieces of my lost jewelry and a handful of my old report cards. I was just staring at it, completely breathless. I asked Maya where she got this. She stammered and said her mom gave it to her, that it was old family stuff. I walked upstairs, holding the box, feeling cold all over. Chloe was in the kitchen on my laptop. I didn't yell. I just held it out and asked her why my stolen things were in her daughter's luggage. I expected her to be embarrassed, to apologize, to blame Maya. Instead, she just stared at me. Then she laughed. She told me I was being dramatic and that Mom gave her that box and that I was probably just misremembering again, like I always do. That laugh. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was a "you're being ridiculous" laugh, and it made my blood run cold. Misremembering again. She's been using that line on me since we were teenagers. Anytime I'd find money missing from my piggy bank, or my favorite shirt would disappear, only to show up in her closet a month later, I was misremembering that it was mine. I'd always let it go because our parents told me I needed to be the bigger person. Now, standing in my own kitchen as a 42-year-old woman, holding proof of decades of her lies, I just felt stupid. I had let this happen. I didn't say another word. I just clutched the box, walked into my bedroom, and locked the door. I could hear her through the door, immediately starting to talk loudly to her husband about how I was attacking her after everything she'd just been through. The narrative flipped instantly. I wasn't the homeowner who just found stolen property. I was the ungrateful, unstable sister kicking her while she was down. I sat on my bed, my hands shaking so bad I could barely open the locket. Inside was the tiny faded picture of my grandmother. I started crying, not just for the lost time with these items, but for the realization that my sister has looked me in the eye and lied to me for our entire lives. The house felt different after that. The air was thick and hostile. They spent the rest of the day whispering in the living room, and I stayed locked in my room, telling them I had to work. I heard Maya ask her mom if I was going to make them leave. Chloe's response, loud enough for me to hear, was that I was just having one of my dramatic fits, and that I'd get over it. That's when the anger really set in. This wasn't just about a box anymore. This was about my entire life, my memories. I waited until I was sure they were asleep. Chloe and her husband are in the guest room, and Maya is in the basement. Around 1 a.m., I took a flashlight and went downstairs. I told myself I was just going to look through the rest of Maya's boxes to see if she had anything else of mine. I felt sick about it, snooping through a teenager's things, but I had to know. Most of it was just salvaged clothes that reeked of smoke. But then, shoved under the portable cot she was sleeping on, I saw a large plastic storage tub. It looked new. It definitely hadn't been in a fire. I lifted the lid, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't full of Maya's things. It was full of my things. My collection of vinyl records I thought I'd lost in college, a box of my old letters, my high school yearbook, and right on top, a stack of photo albums. I recognized them instantly. They were my mother's old albums, the ones she kept of my childhood. I opened the top one. It was full of pictures of me at birthday parties, at my high school graduation, on family vacations. But as I flipped through the pages, I realized something was horribly wrong. In almost every single photo, my face had been violently scribbled out with a black permanent marker. I just stood there in the cold basement light, staring at my own face, completely obliterated by a thick, angry black marker. Page after page, it was the same thing. Me at prom, scribbled out. Me holding my first dog, scribbled out. Me at my college graduation, a furious black void where my smile should have been. It wasn't just my face. Sometimes it was my whole body, as if she was trying to erase me from our family's history. A wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to lean against the wall. This wasn't just theft. This wasn't just jealousy. This was a level of hatred I couldn't comprehend. I heard a small gasp from the stairs. Maya was standing there, her hand over her mouth, her face pale. She just whispered that I wasn't supposed to find that her mom just told her to store some old stuff down here because she didn't want it to get mixed up with their salvaged things. I looked at my niece, this kid I'd felt sorry for, and I realized she was part of it. She knew. She had to know. The box with my locket was her prize for helping her mother hide a lifetime of stolen memories. The sound of Maya's voice must have woken Chloe. I heard her call down from the top of the stairs, her voice annoyed, asking what was going on. I didn't answer. I picked up the photo album, tucked it under my arm, and started walking up the stairs. Maya flattened herself against the wall as I passed. I didn't stop at the main floor. I walked right up to the guest room where Chloe and her husband were sleeping. I didn't knock. I just flipped on the main overhead light, flooding the room and making them both groan. Chloe sat up, blinking, her face instantly twisting into anger when she saw me. She started to ask me what the hell I thought I was doing, waking them up. Her husband, Dan, just looked confused. I didn't say a word. I just opened the photo album to the first page, a picture of me and our mom at the beach, my face a black hole, and I threw it onto the foot of their bed. Chloe's breath hitched. The color drained from her face. Dan sat up and pulled the album closer. He looked at it, flipped a page, and then looked at his wife with a look of pure, horrified confusion. He asked her what this was. Chloe ignored him. She looked at me, and for the first time, I didn't see chaos or neediness. I saw pure venom. She tried to deflect, telling me I was a psycho for going through their things while they were sleeping, that I was invading their privacy. I finally found my voice. It didn't even sound like me. It was low and dead. I told her I wanted them out. Not in the morning. Now. She actually laughed. A high-pitched, hysterical sound. She said I was being dramatic, that it was the middle of the night and they had nowhere to go. She said I couldn't just throw them out on the street. I told her that she had been stealing from me, lying to me, and erasing me my entire life, and that I was done. I looked at Dan and told him I was sorry, but that his wife was a thief and I wanted her out of my house. Dan wasn't looking at me. He was still staring at the album. He kept whispering, "Chloe, what is this?" He looked into the plastic tub I'd left at the top of the stairs, full of my records and yearbooks. He finally looked at her and asked her where she got all this. He asked her how long she'd had it. Chloe's face crumpled. The act was over. She started screaming. Not at me, but at him. She shrieked that he wouldn't understand, that I'd had everything, that I was our mother's favorite, and that I deserved it. She said I'd always looked down on her, and those things were the least she was owed. It was a full-blown confession, raw and terrifying. I just stood in the doorway, watching this stranger scream in my house. Then, I heard a different noise. Dan started yelling back. He wasn't yelling with her. He was yelling at her. He was asking her if she was insane, if this was what the fire insurance money was really for. He yelled that he had wondered where she'd gotten the cash for that new storage unit last month, the one she told him was to pre-store replacement furniture. Dan's question about the storage unit just sucked all the air out of the room. Chloe's face, which had been twisted in a mask of righteous anger, instantly crumpled. The panic in her eyes was primal. She immediately tried to pivot, telling Dan he was confused, that she got the unit after the fire to store things they'd salvaged. But Dan just shook his head, his face ashen. He wasn't buying it. He looked from the tub of my vinyl records to the scribbled-out photos, then back to his wife. I could see the gears turning, years of her chaotic behavior and bad luck suddenly snapping into a terrifying, clear picture for him. He wasn't yelling anymore, which was somehow worse. He just quietly told her he couldn't do this with her. He couldn't be married to this. He then walked to the top of the basement stairs and called down to Maya, his voice thick. He told her to put her shoes on. They were leaving. That's when Chloe completely came apart. She wasn't just crying. She was wailing. She physically grabbed onto Dan's arm, begging him not to leave her, asking how he could do this to her, how he could take my side. It was a performance, and I realized with a sickening lurch that I'd seen it my entire life. This was the same routine she used to get money from our parents, to get me to co-sign for her first apartment, to get me to bail her out of trouble, time and time again. But Dan wasn't me. He just looked at her hand on his arm until she let go. I stepped back from the doorway, pulling out my phone. I told them I was calling an Uber. It would be here in 5 minutes, and I expected all 3 of them to be in it. I told them I'd pay for a hotel for 2 nights, but after that, they were on their own. That was the last bit of fixer left in me, and it felt like pulling a tooth. Chloe turned her rage on me. She shrieked that I was a monster, that I was throwing her and her child out onto the street in the middle of the night just because I was jealous. The audacity of it almost made me laugh. Jealous. Dan just ignored her. He went to the basement, and I heard him speak quietly to Maya for a minute. He came back up carrying Maya's backpack and a single smoke-damaged duffel bag. He looked at me, and his eyes were just dead. He said he was sorry for the trouble. He told Chloe he would be at his mother's, and she could call him when she found a lawyer. He took Maya's hand and walked out my front door. He didn't even wait for the Uber. He and my niece just walked off down the street into the 2 a.m. darkness. Chloe was left standing in my hallway, a statue of pure hatred. The Uber pulled up. She looked at me, and her face was terrifying. She told me I hadn't just ruined her life. I had ruined everything, and I would pay for this. She grabbed her purse and the salvaged box with my music box, and stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall. I stood in the silence, my heart hammering. I locked the deadbolt, and then I locked the chain. I went back to the guest room. It was a disaster. But my eyes landed on Dan's phone, left charging on the nightstand. He'd left it in his hurry. I picked it up. It was an older model, and it wasn't locked. I stood there holding Dan's phone for what felt like an eternity. My whole body was vibrating, like I'd just stepped off a cliff. Part of me knew I should just leave it, put it in a bag and mail it to his mother's. But I couldn't. Chloe's threat, "You will pay for this," was echoing in my ears. And it sounded different now. It wasn't the empty threat of a cornered brat. It felt calculated. I clicked the phone on. The background was a smiling picture of Maya. I felt a pang of guilt, but it vanished instantly. I had to know what they were living in. I had to know if I was safe. I didn't even know what I was looking for. I opened his texts. It was mostly normal stuff. Messages from his mom, a few from work, complaints to Chloe about her not answering her phone. But there was one text from him to his mom from a week ago, before the fire. It said, "I think Chloe's in trouble again. Money is vanishing, and she's being secretive. I don't know what to do." So he knew. He suspected. He just didn't know how bad it was. Then I opened the internet browser. The search history was right there. I felt my stomach clench. It wasn't Dan's searches. The phrasing, the misspellings, it was all Chloe. The first few were from about a month ago. Best personal loans for bad credit. How to sell jewelry fast. Local pawn shops. My stolen jewelry. She wasn't just hoarding it. She was planning to sell it. Then the searches got darker, all from the last 2 weeks. Renter's insurance payout for total loss. What voids a renter's insurance policy? Does insurance investigate small apartment fires? I had to sit down. I collapsed onto the edge of the guest room bed, my head in my hands. It was all there. A meticulous, desperate plan. She was broke, she was in debt, and she saw a total loss fire as her big payday. But the last search, from just 3 days before the fire, made me physically ill. How to start an electrical fire with a faulty outlet. My sister. My chaotic, unlucky sister. She didn't have a fire. She started it. She put her own husband and her own daughter in that apartment and set it on fire, all for an insurance check. The realization was so monstrous, so absolute, that I couldn't even cry. I just felt cold. That's when Dan's comment clicked into place. That new storage unit, she got it before the fire. She didn't lose everything. She moved all their valuable, non-replaceable things into a storage unit first. All the things they salvaged from the fire were just smoke-damaged decoys, part of the performance. And my house? I was just Act 2. I was the safe place to land, the sympathetic sister who would feed and house them while she waited for her fraudulent check to clear. The plastic tub full of my stolen childhood wasn't just hidden at my house. It was next to be pawned. I was shaking so hard I dropped the phone. She hadn't just stolen my memories. She hadn't just lied to me. She was a dangerous criminal who had actively planned to defraud an insurance company and had put her family's lives at risk. And now, she was out there. She had nothing left to lose, and I was the one who had just blown up her entire plan. Her threat wasn't a tantrum. It was a promise. My first thought was that she still had a key. When she first moved in, I gave her one for emergencies, and in the chaos, I hadn't gotten it back. I was suddenly vividly aware of how vulnerable I was. I ran to the front door, checking the deadbolt and the chain lock. Then I went to the back door and did the same. It didn't feel like enough. I grabbed a kitchen chair and wedged it under the front doorknob, feeling like a paranoid character in a bad movie. But I didn't care. The locks on my house were meant to keep out strangers, not a sister who knew all my weak spots. I sat on my sofa, in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had to do something with the phone. This wasn't just my sister being a terrible person anymore. This was evidence. This was a serious, violent crime. With my hands shaking so badly I could barely type, I used my own phone to take pictures and screen recordings of Dan's browser history. Every single search. I emailed the files to my work email and to a brand new anonymous email account I made right then and there. I needed a backup, and a backup for the backup. Then I had to make the call. I couldn't call 911. It wasn't an active emergency, but I couldn't not call. I found the non-emergency number for the local police. I explained in a voice I didn't recognize that I had information regarding a recent apartment fire. I told them I was a relative of the tenants and that I had reason to believe the fire was not an accident. I said I had digital evidence. The dispatcher on the other end was calm, which helped. He took my information, opened a file, and said a detective from the arson investigation unit would be in contact in the morning. He asked if I felt I was in immediate danger. I paused, the chair under my doorknob. I don't know, I said. I really don't know. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I just sat on my sofa with all the lights on, watching the front door. The tub of my stolen life was next to me, along with the scribbled-out photo albums. Every time a car passed, my heart would leap into my throat. I felt like a target. At 6:30 a.m., just as the sky was starting to get light, my phone buzzed with a text. My first instinct was that it was Chloe, and my stomach turned over. But it wasn't. It was from Dan. He must have used Maya's phone, or a new phone. I don't know. The message was short. I'm at my mother's. I am so sorry. I think I left my phone. Please just leave it on the porch. I will get it. Do not talk to Chloe. She is not well. I think she's in serious trouble. I typed back. I know. I have your phone. It's safe. But you need to know she wasn't just in trouble. She caused the trouble. Before he could even reply, a new text came in. This one was from an unknown number, but I knew instantly it was Maya. She must have gotten my number from her dad's phone before he left. Her text was frantic, full of typos. Please don't tell the police. She's crazy. She's been taking money from my college fund. She said she'd get it back with the insurance. She's scaring me. I know where the storage unit is. I have the key. That last text from Maya, I have the key, was a lightning bolt. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't type, So I just hit the call button. She picked up on the first ring, and all I could hear was a tiny hiccuping sob. I told her to breathe, asked her if she was safe, if she was with her dad. She whispered, yes, that they were at her grandmother's, Dan's mom. I had to tell her. I said, Maya, I already called the police. I had to. The sound she made was heartbreaking, but then her voice firmed up, just a little. She said she knew I would. That's why she texted. She said she couldn't stand it anymore. She confessed that her mom had been slowly draining her college fund for the last 6 months, promising she'd pay it all back with interest after the insurance money came. She said her mom threatened her, telling her if she told Dan, she'd be in just as much trouble for being an accessory. She just wanted it to be over. She gave me the address to the U-Store on the other side of town and the unit number. I hung up and my phone immediately rang again. A private number. My stomach bottomed out. I answered, and a man's voice, all business, introduced himself as Detective Miller. He said he was with the Arson and Financial Crimes Unit. He asked me to tell him everything from the beginning. So I did. I walked him through the last 3 weeks, my voice cracking as I described the defaced photos. I told him about the confrontation. And then, I told him about Dan's phone. I read him the search history, word for word. How to start an electrical fire with a faulty outlet. Saying it out loud to a police officer made it real, in a way it hadn't been at 2 a.m. There was a long pause on the other end. Then, Detective Miller's voice was different. He told me to lock my doors, to put the tub of my belongings and the albums in one place, and to not touch Dan's phone again. He said he and a partner were on their way to my house, and that I was not to let anyone else in. He asked for the address of the storage unit, which I gave him. He made it very clear. Ma'am, you are now a material witness in a major investigation. Do not contact your sister. Do not go near that unit. We will handle it from here. I hung up and finally texted Dan. Dan, I'm so sorry. I had to call the police. They know about the searches. They are on their way to my house to collect your phone as evidence. I gave them the storage unit location Maya gave me. His reply came back in less than a minute. Don't be sorry. I just got off the phone with the bank. I was checking Maya's college fund. It's empty. I felt a new, horrible understanding settle over me. This whole thing, the fire, was just the final desperate act. I looked at the tub of my stolen vinyls and yearbooks. I realized this probably wasn't even half of it. The storage unit. That's where she put her valuables. But I had a sick, sinking feeling that the detective wasn't just going to find Chloe's TVs and computers in that unit. I had a feeling he was going to find a whole lot more of my life, packed away in boxes. It felt like I was in a movie, not my own life. Less than an hour after I hung up with Detective Miller, he and another detective were in my living room. I've never felt so exposed. I was in my pajamas, my house was a mess, and I was handing over my defaced photo albums, the tub of my stolen past, and Dan's phone, all in evidence bags. I must have looked like I was about to collapse, because the female detective, O'Brien, spoke to me very gently. She asked me to go over everything one more time. I told them everything, from the night of the fire to the 2 a.m. confrontation. When I got to the part about Dan's phone and the search history for starting an electrical fire, Detective Miller's face was grim. He told me they were leaving immediately for the storage unit and that a patrol car would be stationed on my street for the rest of the day, just as a precaution. The thought of Chloe coming back had me so terrified I just nodded, barely able to speak. The next few hours were a void. I just sat on my couch, staring at the empty space where the tub had been. Around 1 p.m., my phone rang. It was Detective Miller. His voice was all business. Ma'am, we've executed the warrant on the storage unit. I held my breath. He continued. It wasn't just her valuables. It was a lifetime of stolen property. We found at least 5 other units on site registered to aliases, all paid for in cash. We also found items that are consistent with the manufacturing of an incendiary device, as well as the original appliance that was reported as faulty. I just whispered, "Oh God." He told me they had enough to issue a warrant for her arrest on multiple counts, including arson, insurance fraud, and grand larceny. He said she was a person of interest in several other open theft cases in the county. It was so much bigger than I ever could have imagined. She wasn't just my chaotic sister. She was a professional, habitual criminal. Update, 4 months later. Hi, Reddit. I wanted to give one last update, since so many of you asked. Chloe was arrested 2 days after I kicked her out. The police found her at a casino about 2 hours away, trying to use a credit card she'd opened in Maya's name. She didn't even put up a fight. The trial was a nightmare. My parents begged me not to testify, to show compassion. They told me I was ruining the family over some old junk. I've never felt so betrayed in my life. I had to choose between the family I was born into and the truth. I chose the truth. I got on the stand. I held up the photo of me at my graduation, my face completely blacked out by a marker. I told the court about my grandmother's locket. My testimony, combined with the evidence from the storage units, which were full of stolen goods from dozens of people, not just me, and Dan's phone, was overwhelming. Chloe was found guilty. Arson for profit, insurance fraud, grand larceny, and child endangerment. For Maya, she was sentenced to 12 years in prison. She stared at me the entire time the sentence was read. She wasn't crying. She just looked hateful. Dan and Maya are still living with his mom. Maya is in intensive therapy, and she actually called me last week. She just wanted to say thank you for making it stop. Dan is working to slowly rebuild her college fund, the one Chloe completely drained. He's a good man, and I've started bringing them groceries once a week. It's hard, but we're healing. As for me, I sold my house. I couldn't live there anymore. My parents aren't speaking to me. They sent me one last letter, calling me a monster. I tore it up. I'm in a new apartment across town, and I'm in therapy myself, learning how to not be the fixer. I got my locket back from the evidence locker. I wear it every day. It's strange. I spent my whole life cleaning up my sister's messes, and the one time I finally exposed her, everyone called me the villain. But I'm sleeping through the night for the first time in my adult life. I lost my sister, and my parents, and the house I loved. But I finally got myself back, and I'm not misremembering that.